Over the 4th of July, I read Into the Wild while on a fishing trip. I was staying in a small cabin with no heat, no electricity, and no Wi-Fi. This is Chris McCandless's self-portrait outside of a bus in the middle of Alaska. You probably know his story. Jon Krakauer wrote the book, Sean Penn made the movie, and Eddie Vedder provided the soundtrack. Ever since I saw the movie, I've wanted to read the book. Over the 4th of July, I read Into the Wild while on a fishing trip. I was staying in a small cabin with no heat, no electricity, and no Wi-Fi. Chris McCandless, a college graduate, leaves his family, donates $25,000 in savings to charity, abandons his car, and hitchhikes across the American West. McCandless rejects all of the comforts of society in search for adventure and freedom. In April of 1992, he walked into the Alaskan wilderness, searching for his greatest isolation and adventure yet. In August, his decomposed body was found by a moose hunter. Chris's story is idolized by young adventurers and criticized by others who don't understand why he took such risks. There have been a few stories of young people dying while embarking on similar adventures. 2 people have died trying to visit the bus where McCandless spent his final weeks. Living in Utah, I know several people who moved west to be closer to nature, and they cite Into the Wild as a major inspiration. I decided to read this book during a fishing trip in Alaska. I hoped that being in Alaska would somehow heighten the experience. I wasn't in complete isolation like McCandless was, but I was still surrounded by nature. I was with my family and some 20 to 30 other campers at the fish camp. We had no cell service, so I would have plenty of time to read and reflect on what I was reading. I didn't walk into the Alaskan bush like McCandless. I flew a plane to Anchorage, and then from Anchorage to Dillingham, and then flew a small float plane to the fish camp on the Nushagak River. Although we were saying we were off the grid because we didn't have Wi-Fi or cell service, we still had hot water, a small cabin without lights or electricity, and someone cooking our meals. The comforts of society like hot water, hot meals, and bottles of Heinz ketchup were there to make us feel at home, so we weren't 100% off the grid. After spending a week without cell service, I realized just how little we need the cell phones. It would have been nice to check in with friends and family or check up on business, but my incessant need to keep tabs on people who don't even know I exist is now troubling to me. For a week, the only thing that mattered was fishing, reading, and being with my family. It felt incredible. And although I cheated by downloading a few episodes of Game of Thrones and a Roger Federer documentary, my screen time had never been lower. I felt a weight back on my soul when I landed in Anchorage and checked Instagram. There they were, posting pretty much the same thing they were posting when I left. Will I reject social media? Probably not, but I know I should. McCandless embraced authors like Tolstoy, Thoreau, and Jack London. The writings and beliefs of these authors about living a minimalistic life in nature inspired McCandless to go on his adventure. Sadly, it was also an abusive family that pushed the young man to the road. Once he left, he ceased all contact with his family. I didn't know Krakauer would weave in other stories of young men rejecting society to live in the wild. The author even tells his own near-death experience climbing in Alaska. Young men have been doing this forever. Some stories, like Chris McCandless's, have a lasting impression. Chris McCandless seeks to live the transcendental beliefs expressed in Thoreau's book Walden. Beliefs like self-wisdom, free will, individualism, connecting with nature, and living a simple life are all things Chris seeks. The heaviest thing Chris carried into Alaska was his library of paperback books. The sad thing about Chris's story is that he had to die in this pursuit. I think we can all live the transcendental beliefs without going to the extreme like McCandless. Some people like Chris and other adventure seekers need a higher dose of freedom, adrenaline, and individuality. Krakauer has a line in the book where he talks about how when he is climbing the icy, dangerous surfaces, he is not thinking about any problems back home. The author writes, "By and by, your attention becomes so intensely focused that you no longer notice the raw knuckles, the cramping thighs, the strain of maintaining nonstop concentration. A trance-like state settles over your efforts. The climb becomes a clear-eyed dream. Hours slide by like minutes. The accumulated clutter of the day-to-day existence, the lapses of conscience, the unpaid bills, the bungled opportunities, the dust under the couch, the inescapable prison of your genes, all of it is temporarily forgotten, crowded from your thoughts by an overpowering clarity of purpose and by the seriousness of the task at hand. Chris must have felt this clarity of purpose on his own adventures. When you bring up the story of Chris McCandless, you get a mixed bag of reactions. Some people idolize the young man, and some call him a straight-up idiot. The idea that McCandless was an idiot and even suicidal is presented in this book. But Chris lived successfully for weeks. The author thinks that he had every intention to leave Alaska if he could. Unfortunately, a few mistakes proved fatal. After I saw the movie, I think I idolized McCandless for his boldness. It would not be easy to live the way he lived, with no modern comforts of society. But it seems like it rewarded the young man in multiple ways. The book changed my perspective. I can see why people would criticize McCandless and label him as crazy or mentally ill or immature for not facing his problems. Do I idolize or criticize him now? I'm somewhere in the middle. Dying was completely unnecessary. I think he was running from something he couldn't stand to face. And when he was ready to face his past, it was too late. This book was definitely the right thing for me. I think reading it in nature truly enhanced the experience. But it's an excellent book to read anywhere. If you enjoy books on adventure or nature, then you should read this book. I sent a copy to my grandpa, and he said the book hooks you in and you don't want to put it down. If you've read this book, let me know what you thought about it in the comments. Thanks for watching, and as always, read the right thing.